And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game from the Mini Games library, from Level 99 Games. In particular, we're going to take a look at a mostly two-player game that is played simply with a deck of cards called Noir. Now, this game has several different variants, and I'm going to brush on a couple of them. I may not cover all of them in detail, but you'll see how the game plays and how it uses this deck of cards to accomplish many different things. And then we'll come back and we'll get my final opinions on the game as a whole. So here you can see the components for Noir set up for a game. Now this deck can actually play several different games. We're going to look at one or two of them, but know that most of the games are about one person playing a secret identity, or multiple people playing a secret identity, and another person trying to figure out who that person is, or who everybody else is. So in this case, we're going to look at a two-player game, and it's going to be the Killer versus Inspector game, where one player is a killer, and they have a secret identity, which is going to be a card they get from this deck here. And that secret identity is going to be Julian. Well, Julian is right here in our grid, so our killer now knows where they're at. The other player is going to be the Inspector, and they are going to have 4 cards right off the bat. Now, in the first turn of the game, the killer is going to have to kill one person adjacent to them. Adjacent means either orthogonal or diagonal, so they can kill any one of these people by turning them to their deceased side. Maybe they choose Baron here, and they kill him off. At this point, our Inspector is going to decide who he is going to be. So he's going to look at the cards he has in his hand, and he's going to choose a secret identity. So he has Ernest, Simone, I can't even read that upside down, and Linus. I think it's Ophelia. But he's going to choose one of these 4 people to be his secret identity, and he's going to place it face down in front of him. And the other cards will become his hand. So now we know that the detective is Ernest, or the inspector is Ernest, and the killer is Julian. Well, each player knows that respectively, and we're going to start playing the game. And we're going to take turns alternating between killer and inspector, and the killer now gets another turn. And on his turn, he has a choice of 3 potential actions. He can shift any one of the row or columns, and when he does this, he's simply going to slide it in a direction and then reposition the card that slid off at the top or bottom of the row, or left or right, whatever the case may be. So let's say he wanted to shift this whole row. He could shift this down, and the card that was at the bottom would be at the top. And so he's repositioning either himself or suspects or whatever he thinks is going to be beneficial to keeping the inspector from finding who he is. A second one of his options could be simply to kill another person, but you don't want to kill too many people in a row because you're going to start narrowing down where you're at. So right now we know that Julian is our suspect, and he killed Baron, and so he can kill another person if he wanted to. He would simply flip them over, and he would kill them. Well, now this is getting kind of well, I guess we don't know too much more. It could be anybody over here. It could be Ryan. It could be Vladimir. It's really still kind of up in the air. I guess it can't be Vladimir because he couldn't have killed this player up here. But you get the idea. You can kill anyone adjacent as your action for the turn, or you can slide. Your third option is to try and disguise yourself. If you think the inspector is on to who you might be, you think the inspector really knows that Julian is the killer, you can try and disguise yourself. And in doing so, you draw a card from this deck, and you look at it. And if that player, well, bad luck, if that player is still alive, you can try and switch yourself to that person. But in this case, we drew Baron. Not so good. Baron's already dead. We can't disguise ourselves to Baron, so we discard the card. But if we had drawn somebody else, we would simply discard our card from the deck, Julian. They would now know that Julian is not the person, and Franklin would be the new suspect, although the inspector, of course, wouldn't know that. Now, as the inspector, you're trying to arrest whoever the criminal is. So in this case, Franklin now. And you're going to have similar actions. You're going to be able to slide the grid around to try and reposition yourself, but you're also going to be able to accuse other people or arrest other people and exonerate people. So arresting is much like killing people as the thief, or as the killer, I guess. You're going to be trying to accuse people who are next to you. So since we are Ernest, we're going to be trying to reposition ourselves in a way to get over to where we think the suspect is. So maybe we want to slide this row this way to move ourselves closer to where we think the person is. But you don't want to be too obvious, because if you get killed as the inspector, you automatically lose the game. So you can slide, but you can also try and exonerate somebody. And when you do this, you're going to draw a card from the deck, and you're immediately going to discard one of the cards from your hand. So you could discard Simon. And now we know that Simon must be innocent. And you've learned more information about the board. You now know that Neil is not the killer. So you get to draw a card into your hand and discard a card in order to find out some more information about the board. Your final option is you can accuse somebody on the board, and you can even accuse yourself, but when you accuse, you're trying to make an arrest. And if you accuse the right person, you win the game. And that's going to be how the inspector can win. So the killer has two ways of winning, either killing off the inspector or killing 16 people on this grid, whereas the inspector needs to arrest whoever the killer is. Another variant on the game is where the killer actually gets 4 targets, and he's going to have them face down in front of him, and he will get one at a time. It's basically a hit list. And he has many of the same actions, so the first person he's going to need to kill is Phoebe, and he's going to be trying to move around this board to kill all of these people in order. And the actions are pretty much the same. There's still sliding, there's still killing, but it adds an action for each player. So this player here can basically try and switch their identity much like before, but if they do so, their previous identity has to go face down into their hit list, and they get a new identity, so essentially extending the game, but maybe getting them away from some of the heat of the inspector. The inspector has a different action where he, from his hand of cards, can discard a card, and that will force the other player to say yes or no as to whether or not they are adjacent to that person. So they could discard Wilhelm here and say, are you adjacent to Wilhelm? And the other player will have to answer yes or no. And it works much in the same way. The player who is the killer is trying to kill off their entire hit list, whereas the person who is the police officer is trying to find them before they manage to accomplish their goal. The other variants are multiplayer or just extended variants of the game for figuring out a much more difficult way for the thief to win. So one is where each player has their own secret identity, and you're trying to figure out who they are in order to collect trophies in that game, and the person to the most trophies, so the first person to a set number of trophies wins the game. Whereas the other game is a 2-player game where there are treasure tokens on each of these cards, and the objective of one player is to steal all of the treasure tokens from each of the people on the board before they're caught. Essentially robbing everyone on the board before the police officer figures out who they are. So that's the several different variants to the game. It can play a whole bunch of different stuff, but most of them are deduction games where you're trying to have one person figure out who the other person is before they accomplish their goal. Well, there you have it. That is Noir, and I cannot stress enough how much of a great job I think they did in the design of this game for a small little deck of cards. I mean, we have just a deck of cards. I don't know how many cards it is, but it can't be much more than 50, maybe even less than that. And with that, they've managed to accomplish the feel of a game like Mr. Jack, which has a board and wooden pieces and special abilities and flipping tiles and all kinds of crazy things. And while I love Mr. Jack, the footprint of this game is much smaller, the feel of it is excellent, and it plays in a much shorter time frame. You can just lay it out onto the table, give one person a secret identity, give the other person their hand of cards, and boom, you're off and going. And it's really fun. It's got a little bit of an abstract-y feel to it, with small amount of components and great gameplay. So all in all, I can't praise this game enough. I definitely suggest you check out Noir from Level 99 Games. If you can't check out the whole minigame library, I think you can get it individually. Definitely a game I would suggest to almost any type of gamer out there who's looking for a small, easy, fun deduction game to play with friends, family, or whoever it might be.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.